come up too, because we have time for Q&A for you if you want to do that. and and then in about 25 minutes, we're gonna do lunch. So, any questions? What's a good way to heat water?
Geothermal is a good way. In the past, we used solar hot water panels, which aren't really efficient anymore. We've gone to all electric because they're way cheaper. So my older projects all had solar hot water. Now we don't. We use geothermal, you know, so.
There are heat pump units that have an outdoor heat pump and an indoor storage tank. Sandon is a company that makes that. I think Chiltrix is a chiller system. It's a residential scale chiller system. So there are ways of getting that heat pump out of the house. And I think there may be other things coming online with some other suppliers that we keep asking for. So if the idea is, so much of this is happening with heat pump, right? The refrigerator is a heat pump. We use heat pumps in dryers now, condensation dryers, heat pump dryers. It's like everything's just moving energy around. And so ideally, you just got like a central brain heat pump, and you just put the energy where it needs to be. So I think that some heat pump manufacturers are going to be offering space conditioning plus water conditioning as a package unit.
So the benefits of both a heat pump, well, heat pump in general, geothermal or air-to-air is, so for every 1 kilowatt of electricity you use, you're essentially, most of the COP, it's really relatively similar, depending what time of the year it is, you're producing about 2.5 kilowatts of heat, if that makes sense, just using as an analogy. So it is smart to use heat pump technology, absolutely. Mike's shaking his head over there too. Heat pump makes a lot of sense. It's just our climate makes it difficult to generate heat indoors, and that's what a heat pump water heater does. And Tom's right, if you find a way to put the condenser outside, or they make hot water heaters that actually can run ductwork to the outside. So it's drawing air in from outside through a duct that comes over to the heat pump condenser and then pushes the outgoing air out. It makes sense. We've used a standard heat pump water heater with no ductwork on the outside. We turn it to all electric in the winter, and in the summertime we turn it back to full heat pump. So we're dehumidifying the house and cooling the house down is one of the benefits. But I think heat pump technology is great. And all electric water heater we've used, but heat pumps work well. It's still a good solution. Outside would be better though. Yes, back here. Yeah. Mine show my slab is completely inside. So we had the ICF block. So we've got 2.5 inches of EPS foam on the outside, 2.5 inches of foam on the inside, concrete core in the middle. Then we stacked a layer of 2 inch of XPS foam inside of that. Then the slab got poured inside of there. That slab is 100% indoors, and it has to be. You cannot have that thermal mass extending to the outside anywhere. On top of the foam, yeah, and then up against the ICF. So it didn't sit up on top of the foam, it sat down like almost like a bathtub of foam is what it did, yeah. Great question, though.
It's interesting. When I got interested in architecture in 1979, it was Ed Mesria's Passive Solar Energy book had just been published. And he was kind of that was the Bible of the mass and glass approach, where you basically have a ton of glass on the south side and a lot of thermal mass on the inside. You use the sun to heat the thermal mass, and then that sort of radiates throughout the night, which works great in New Mexico. And the thing is that at the same time as that kind of school of thought was going, as people were really going after energy conservation in those kind of Carter years, there was a super insulation group that was working as well. And the problem the super insulation group was having was that they were getting terrible air quality because they hadn't figured out ventilation. So, but what happened is in our climate, like climate zone 5, where it's cold enough, that mass and glass were really uncomfortable. You get these wild temperature swings, even with good glass. It's a terrible insulator compared to a wall. So you get this this wild up and down temperature swings, and you're trying to use that thermal mass to even everything out, but it's not really doing it. So so thermal mass will stabilize the temperature a certain amount, but we're not using that passive solar mass and glass idea from the 70s. We're doing more moderate glazing, And so it's more about keeping the energy in the building instead of like trying to get huge amounts of energy in and hold it in the glass. We're just trying to hold it, or sorry, hold it in the mass. We're trying to hold it with the insulation, if that makes sense.
And what's really difficult about our climate zones is you get these swings. Like Tom was talking about, in Illinois, a little bit different. Northern Michigan's horrible. You get these shoulder months of September, October, March, April, where it could be 65 during the day and then drop down to 28 at night. And when you've got a mass like that, whether it's inflow radiant heating or you're trying to absorb that sunlight during the day, you can't cool the house off fast enough in the daytime. The slab is just radiating constantly, so that's tough too. And that's why you read a lot about how performance homes don't use inflow radiant heating systems because of that reason. It's challenging to get the temperature to balance out when you've got, especially in our climate zone where you've got a lot massive swings. Yes, sir, in the back.
John Freeman, GLREA. This has all been great, and I completely understand the economics when you're building a home from scratch. What about the market where people have a home already built in the 50s, 60s, post-Second World War? What is the economics of doing some of these measures for retrofitting homes that currently exist?
It's all over the map based on what the assembly is and what you're going to do. So we did a project a couple of years ago on a brick 2-flat in the city that they knew they wanted to do a gut remodel. So there we basically spray foamed the envelope and put solar on the roof, and it was a $400,000 project. So it was less than doing a new house, and it saved a lot of embodied energy of all the material that was there. But it's expensive. Now, I had an owner of a Frank Lloyd Wright house call me a couple months ago, and Mark and I are working on this project. She said, I want you to make my house net zero. Like, oh my God. Without destroying the architecture, without like ripping out the windows and all that. So on that, there's just no question we're going to have to do geo. We got to do everything as efficiently as possible and insulate as carefully as possible. No spray foam. We're not going to stick anything to Frank Lloyd Wright's thing. So anyway, so it really depends. But generally, what I found over the years of pricing these out with people is it is about as expensive to, if you're going to go to total high performance like this, you're going to have new mechanical systems. You're probably going to have new electric service. You're going to have to rethink all the penetrations. You're going to have to mitigate all the thermal bridges. You're going to have to deal with all the moisture that's coming up through the slab that they didn't have capillary breaks. And you're going to redo the thermal envelope, probably replace all the windows. You're building a new house in an old house, and it's just as expensive as building a new house. But it saves a lot of material, and it's worth it from an energy standpoint. The thing is that the other frustration as an architect, what I see is, like, here's this square footage of the old building that had a different mindset of the way spaces would work. And now we're going to make it work for the new family, the new way of thinking about how a family works in a house. And the square footage isn't exactly in the right place, so we got to move the stair. It gets into big cans of worms, and usually we wind up with more square footage than if we built it new. So there's a lot of trade-offs, but generally there's not a lot of easy fixes for retrofit. I guess the closest thing would be like the interior's fine. We're just going to put a bunch of foam. They call it the chainsaw retrofit. A bunch of foam on the outside. You chainsaw off the rafter tails. You foam the outside. You foam the roof, which means you probably have to sister up all the rafters so they're stronger. And then you build a new overhang, and you just put all the insulation on the outside of the house. You left the inside alone, except for putting in an ERV and a new mechanical system. So that's complicated.
I rent a bulldozer is usually what I do. I don't have patience for remodels. Remodel's tough, and it is. And we have a tremendous amount of existing stock that needs a lot of help. I just chosen that's not my path.
Big issue.
There's guys in this room that do a really good job at it too, that do phenomenal remodel work and understand that process. But yeah, I'm a bulldozer fan. Donate materials to Habitat Restore first, though. Then bulldoze it.
Yeah.
Yes.
The last project that he was discussing, the one in the future, that's our
Yeah.
project.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And so we're up against this right now. We're up against this actually with about 5 or 6 homes that we're working on. By the way, in our career, we've retrofitted over 4,900 homes
You guys should be up here.
in the
That's awesome.
Southwest Michigan area since 1990. I've been in business doing this. So what you just described is my everyday business. And so what we've done is we've gotten a lot sharper in the modeling and a lot more studious up front with making a plan. only afford X amount, of course, we're going to try to give you the biggest savings to investment ratios that we can for the measures that we're performing. And also, keep it in mind your indoor air quality, yada, yada. What we found also is we found that you can gain a lot by starting with the air sealing, okay? Because as you said before, sometimes we can gain 50% reduction with the air sealing. So hence the necessity for the modeling, can't stress that enough. If you model a place correctly and if you have a really good plan, it really doesn't matter your income level because you're paying to live in the space anyway. Why not make a plan that involves continuously bringing those loads down over the future? We got some clients that are opting out for doing one wall system at a time and one window system at a time, starting with the worst and moving through the whole structure like that. So we can make a 5 or a 10-year plan for someone who can't afford it, and maybe even starting with the foundation. If you can see outside around the foundation, obviously that's a no-brainer. I had a question regarding your foundation on yours. It looked like a shallow frost protected foundation. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Was that a mono slab, easy form, or what?
Well, no, the one that we've done a couple of them with, well, two different ways. One, we just did a traditional stem wall and insulation on both sides, and then foam underneath the slab, foam grate. A little bit of a thermal bridge there. The other one, we basically formed up high density EPS around the ring beam. Yeah. So now we're looking at J-form. I'm trying to think of the name of the company that basically have a pre-molded piece.
It's the same thing as there's air turns on.
I use the monoslide easy form, but then me and Jake from our value started doing that with an ICF home, and we ended up changing their design to a better design that Jake designed it, and then we found Michigan foam here, and we had them make the pieces ourselves here in Grand Rapids instead of getting it from monoslide, which has to be shaped.
So is this an EPS manufacturer cuts the shape?
Yes, and it's shaped that you want right here in town. So Jake's kind of modified mono slabs to work with our ICF. Our ICF wall systems, and that foam from the mono slab lines right up with our ICF wall, and the concentrates on the concrete, and it just works out great.
That was the question. How do you deal with that transition? We had some issues.
From slab to beam? Yeah.
Especially with the
Yeah. So when we did the stem wall, basically we did an 8-inch stem wall up, and then we notched it a couple inches. So when we sat a 2x6 on it and finished it out, it was the top of that stem wall was cut. And then we separated that little 2-inch notch. We brought the seat. Now we didn't have a foam gap, and that was the inside finish. Yeah, basically, with the stem wall, it was a 2-part fork. With the other one, it was a monolith, where we used yeah.
I like it. It's a little tougher.
Yeah, but we were doing a ground finish on the slab after, so.
Thanks a lot. You guys seen the monolith domes? Very familiar with the monolith dome? I won't waste a lot of time.
Yeah,
Can we use a microphone?
Yeah.
You guys have a hard time hearing? Any other questions?
Yeah, what's the average cost to get SC? I mean, I noticed that would be a range, but what's the?
Average cost for what? For a new home. For a new home?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's 2-3 hours conversation there. It depends on the finish of the house. So market, if you look at kind of a very simple. Like I know a lot of stuff because demand's back up again. Obviously, housing's picked back up. I think most everything's averaging, at least across the state, other than unique areas like mine or the Gold Coast, as we like to refer to it as. $200 a square foot on a high end. Still affordable housing still being built around 150, maybe 160, and we've got projects that exceed $300 a square foot. So it all depends on finishes. There's so many different variables. No, Habitat, we're way less than that. Habitat, we're $100 a square foot or less. Yeah, because it's half of it's volunteer labor. So we're eliminating that whole, part of it. But market pricing, that's where market pricing is. And that's really jumped in the last 2 years. The other massive, we have a discussion for a long time too, is the lack of labor. I sit on our Home Builder Association board, and I chair our education committee. And I do everything I can to go around to local schools and help these kids understand they don't have to work at McDonald's or get a 4-year degree. There's opportunities with certifications in the middle, and allow them to be an electrician or plumber, because that whole thing's been blown apart in the last 30 years. So that's another problem. That's causing housing costs to rise.
I think the percentage change is probably the most relevant way to look at it, right? So whether it's $200 per square foot, 300 or 400, the difference
to build green. Yeah. Well, I showed you the model earlier. It can actually be a net gain if you plan it properly. And again, it's sitting down and determining where you put those dollars. Is it in the envelope? Is it in PV?
Right. I think that's really the thing. I guess when I get a question like that about cost, I would say, well, how much is the average cost of a car? It's the same thing, because if I'm getting the Chevy Volt versus the Tesla Model S, I'm getting an electric car. It costs a little different. So yeah. So absolutely, and that's where Rocky Mountain Institute's paper that I put up on the slide of the economics of net zero was really the best kind of in-depth study that I've seen to really parse that. But man, I tell you, it's crazy how construction costs vary across the country. I mean, in Chicago, I would say we could build you a new passive house for somewhere between $250 and $600 a square foot. But they're tending to come in the threes generally. But those are houses that people have a really high level of finish, and all of our indoor air quality there's no added formaldehyde anything. All the paints and sealants and caulks and adhesives are Green Guard certified at least, if not Declare label. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And I guess that's the car analogy, but yeah. But what we found in our study is it's 4 to 7% increase to go from co-built to passive. Yeah. Is it faster to do a new build versus retrofit? And it depends, I think.
Remodel work, and again, I don't do a lot of it, very little of it. There's challenges because a lot of times the family or the owner wants to live in the house at the same time. And these guys probably answer this way better than I could. But new construction, everything's for the most part in control. In remodel, you're opening walls up and guessing what's in there, and you got an owner that wants to live in one half of the house and not in the other. So I would say, my personal opinion, you could correct me if I'm wrong, remodels on a level of scope of work would take longer than new construction.
Well, I mean, yeah, you could do a modular prefab and set the thing in a day, and finish it in 2 months. But what's really great point that he was making earlier about retrofit is that you don't have to go to net zero. You can hit some low-hanging fruit and save a ton of money. The first dollars you put in insulation and air sealing are going to give you the biggest bang right out of the gate, and so you can drop that down. And that's the approach to take with really important historic houses, I think, is that don't throw away our heritage. If you can cut the energy down by 50% instead of 100, that's still something great. And we get to keep some culture, some history. But anyway, with the remodel, it's really the question of, if you're talking about doing a comprehensive retrofit and getting it to a totally new high performance home, then usually a good home builder is going to go quicker in new construction because all the trades are lined up and it's predictable. A good remodeler can do that too, but it's less predictable. Open up the walls and what do we got? I think.
I'd say the home that we're working on is 1890s farmhouse, and they just opened up the walls, and it's full of lead paint everywhere. I mean, even some of the studs were painted white for some reason. They might have not had interior drywall at one point way back in the 1800s, but they found painted studs white with lead paint on it and different things. At another home with Better World Builders, we had asbestos in it. Boom, it stops construction. It's like 4 weeks. We had to abate the asbestos. I mean, old homes, you run into all sorts of things you never predict. You know, you got lead pipes, you got so many different things. So like this homeowner for the 1890s house called me the other day and said, "Do you think we'll be in by July?" I'm like, there ain't a chance you're going to be in by July. There's no way. I mean, so, you know, I told her we're going to be easy 6 to 8 months. And she goes, "Oh, I was really hoping to be in by July." I said, "You want a zero energy? You know, you want to take this home to zero energy, and it was built in the 1890s, you know? There's so many things that we got to do. And the whole exterior is, you know, wood lap siding, but it's filled with lead. It's cheaper to take it off and redo it than it is to abate it. So there.
Another question.
Just an alternate viewpoint, solar, hot
Speak
water.
up, please.
Solar hot water does work in Michigan. I've had one solar hot water system for 20 years, and I've had the gas company come out 3 times to make sure the meter was working properly. Another viewpoint is in Michigan, you talked about minimal windows for energy heat loss, but we really need daylight because we have.
I didn't say minimum. I said you don't need the entire south wall.
Right. I've got big windows, and it really helps the seasonal affective disorder here. My wife kind of has that, so that's another thing to think about.
It's 50 south glazing, surface area of the wall, 50% south, 20 on east and west.
Right. So it's good to have your great room and stuff on the south if possible. The other question I had for Eric, you had that river escape house. You didn't mention the builder in that. That was me, right? Okay, thanks.
You know, it's interesting what you're saying about the windows. I've been thinking about that a lot because, I mean, architects, you know, we love to just load up tons of glass, and it's expensive and it is energy intensive. So the way I've been looking at it is trying to create places where people gather and you sort of concentrate the glass there and try to get the things where people aren't spending a lot of time, you know, all the storage and mechanicals and closets and all that stuff. Get it on the north side. We're not going to worry about not having the windows. But the bigger thing is like both for the form of the building and the impact of the building and kind of where your eye goes as a point of interest, a focus point, compositionally, is that's the glass. That's the highest point of contrast. And that should be the place where you want to be in the building. So I totally agree. And the light thing is huge. My wife's from Alaska. We go up there in the wintertime and it's brutal. It's almost like Traverse City. So, yeah, I'm only up there in the summer. That's why I think it's the most beautiful place. Oh, no, that's true. I go up and ski a little bit. Yeah, that's right. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so I guess the building doesn't need to look like it's mostly glass, but when you're in it and you're spending time, I think, yeah, you want to feel like it's really full of light in the right places. So it's a design thing. Yeah.
I got a project that's a Frank Lloyd Wright Usonian home, and they want it all to be lifetime designed and passive solar and everything, but it's on a lake and it's on the north side. So all my glass has to be on the north side, and there's nothing really on the south side, so I'm struggling. You know, he has all these things he wants me to do, but it's like, but your view's on the north, you know, and it's tough. You know, sometimes you can't do all the things that clients want because of the view. And I'm not going to have a lot of natural light in. It's going to be very dark, you know, because my south side is just no view. And we have a lot of, you know, transom windows on that side. And I'm struggling trying to figure out how to get light in. I'm trying to think of, you know, coming from I got a flat roof, so I'm trying to bring some light in from the south somehow. So, yeah, so.
Yeah, last one.
We just did. I'm actually fortunate we work on 2 passive houses. One of them's in this room. The one we just completed was panelized, came from Colorado, and we created our thermal envelope was the floor system. So the lower level, superior wall, is garage / storage / some other stuff. So we looked at air sealing details and insulation at the floor level between the foundation and the main part of the house. So I haven't got into one where we've actually had the superior wall as part of the foundation, but superior walls are pretty awesome. And in general, they're just a great system. They're price-wise, they're very competitive with an insulated poured concrete wall. ICFs are very close too. They're getting closer. So there's lots of options there too. But yeah, superior wall is great. I don't know about passive. The other project we're working on is poured wall with some heavy insulation on the inside, partial basement, and then insulated slab on grade on other parts of the house. I've done them. They do. They make essentially their 2-foot knee wall can be also double as a frost protected shell foundation wall. Yeah, they're great. I've been using them for 9 years now, and I love them. No. Initially, they had problems with the foam exposed on the inside with flame spread, and Dow magically made it go away. I don't know how it happened. Might have been a big trick. I don't know. Anyways, no. They at one point, I think it's because it's recessed far enough back in the cavity that it doesn't have the flame spread the same as it would if it was a applied foam to the inside of a poured wall. But that was the only issue I've heard about with superior walls. Other than that, you know, the typical questions I get is this thing going to leak? You're putting panel next to panel. Is that glue really going to hold it all together? I've had 0 problems with it. And you'll get online, you'll read a few things. It's usually because it's bad installation, but it's a great product. It really is. Yeah, and ICF's great too. I mean, there's lots of good opportunities out there. The thing I'm seeing that's kind of diminishing and going away is the old-fashioned poured concrete wall.
All right, well, we're going to have lunch now. So huge thanks to Eric, Ryan, Tom, Case Studies. So real quick, lunch is back there. If it's not raining.